Welcome to this lecture on the management of acute upper gastrointestinal bleeding in adults. This presentation will provide a guideline-based approach intended for medical students and residents. Before we begin, a brief disclaimer. This presentation is for educational purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. Please consult with a qualified healthcare professional for any medical concerns. By the end of this lecture, you will be able to, first, perform the initial assessment and resuscitation of a patient with acute upper GI bleeding. Second, differentiate between variceal and non-variceal bleeding and initiate appropriate initial medical therapy. Third, apply risk stratification scores like the GBS and AIMS65 to guide patient disposition and prognostication. Fourth, describe the principles of endoscopic therapy for both variceal and non-variceal bleeding. And finally, outline the key components of post-endoscopy and long-term management. So, what is an upper GI bleed? It's defined as bleeding that originates proximal to the ligament of Treitz. Patients can present in several ways, with hematemesis, which is the vomiting of bright red blood or coffee ground material, melena, which are black, tarry stools, or, in cases of massive and rapid bleeding, with hematochezia or bright red blood per rectum. This is a serious condition. While mortality for non-variceal bleeding is between 2 and 10%, it can be as high as 10 to 20% at 6 weeks for variceal bleeding. The causes are varied, but the most common is peptic ulcer disease, accounting for about 40% of cases. Varices are the cause in about 20%, followed by erosive disease, Mallory-Weiss tears, and a group of other causes like malignancy, Dieulafoy's lesions, and angiodysplasia. When you encounter a patient with a suspected upper GI bleed, assessment and resuscitation must happen simultaneously. Start with the ABCS. Assess the airway, especially in patients with massive hematemesis or altered mental status, and consider early intubation for airway protection. Ensure adequate breathing and oxygenation. For circulation, your first step is to establish 2 large-bore, 16 to 18 gauge intravenous lines. Begin fluid resuscitation with crystalloids if the patient is hypotensive. However, a crucial word of caution. In a patient with suspected variceal bleeding, avoid over-resuscitation, as this can worsen portal hypertension and exacerbate the bleeding. Order stat labs, including a complete blood count, coagulation studies, a type and screen, liver function tests, and a BUN and creatinine. Keep the patient NPO or nothing by mouth. And finally, a clinical pearl. The initial hematocrit can be falsely reassuring due to slow equilibration after acute blood loss, so don't be fooled by a normal initial value. Next, perform a focused history and physical exam. Key historical points include any history of liver disease or heavy alcohol use, prior peptic ulcer disease or H. pylori infection, and a thorough medication history, looking for NSAIDs, aspirin, anticoagulants, and antiplatelets. Ask about recent retching or vomiting, which might suggest a Mallory-Weiss tear, and any episodes of syncope. Also inquire about prior GI bleeds, any known cardiovascular disease, and prior aortic surgery, which could raise suspicion for a rare aortoenteric fistula. On physical exam, check vitals for tachycardia, hypotension, or orthostasis. Look for stigmata of chronic liver disease like jaundice, ascites, or spider angiomata. Palpate for epigastric tenderness. And finally, a stool assessment is crucial to document melena or hematochezia. A key laboratory clue is the BUN to creatinine ratio. A ratio greater than 30 is highly suggestive of an upper GI source, as the digestion and absorption of blood proteins in the upper GI tract leads to a disproportionate rise in BUN. This brings us to the most critical initial decision point in management: differentiating between variceal and non-variceal bleeding. The treatment pathways are very different. Clinical clues for variceal bleeding include a known history of cirrhosis or heavy alcohol use, and the presence of stigmata of chronic liver disease on exam. Clues for non-variceal bleeding include a history of peptic ulcer disease, H. pylori or NSAID use with no signs of liver disease. The 2024 AASLD guidelines provide a critical teaching point. In a patient with known cirrhosis who presents with an upper GI bleed, You must presume the bleeding is variceal until proven otherwise and begin treatment accordingly. Once the patient is stabilized, we need to risk stratify them. The Glasgow-Blatchford score, or GBS, is the primary tool for this. Its purpose is to predict the need for intervention, such as transfusion, endoscopy, or surgery, and mortality. It is primarily used to guide disposition. The score includes the BUN, hemoglobin, systolic blood pressure, pulse, and the presence of melena, syncope, liver disease, or heart failure. A score of 0 to 1 indicates a very low risk, and these patients can often be considered for outpatient management. A score of 2 or greater indicates a higher risk and requires admission. A complementary tool is the AIMS65 score. Its purpose is to predict in-hospital mortality and the need for ICU admission, so it's used for prognostication. It's a simple 5-point score, with 1 point for each of the following: albumin less than 3.0, INR greater than 1.5, altered mental status, systolic blood pressure of 90 or less, and age greater than 65. A score of 2 or more is associated with a significantly increased risk of mortality. Now let's discuss initial medical therapy. Please note that all drug dosages should follow your local institutional protocols. For patients who are being admitted for endoscopy with suspected active bleeding, a prokinetic agent like intravenous erythromycin can be given to improve visualization by clearing blood from the stomach. Metoclopramide is not recommended for this purpose. If non-variceal bleeding is suspected, the role of preendoscopic IV PPIs is debated. The 2021 ACG guidelines note that while they may decrease the proportion of patients with high-risk stigmata found during endoscopy, they do not improve clinical outcomes like rebleeding or mortality. However, if variceal bleeding is suspected, or in any patient with known cirrhosis, you must start 2 key medication classes immediately: a vasoactive agent, such as octreotide or terlipressin, to reduce portal pressure, and antibiotic prophylaxis, typically with ceftriaxone. The duration for antibiotics is a maximum of 7 days, and they can often be stopped once the bleeding is resolved and vasoactive agents are discontinued, per AASLD 2024 guidelines. Finally, tranexamic acid, or TXA, is not recommended, based on the findings of the HALT-IT trial published in The Lancet in 2020. For transfusions, a restrictive strategy is the standard of care. We transfuse red blood cells for a hemoglobin less than 7 grams per deciliter. The one major exception is for patients with known cardiovascular disease, where a higher threshold of 8 grams per deciliter is recommended by both the ACG and the AABB. For platelets, transfuse if the count is less than 50,000 in a patient with active bleeding. However, in patients with cirrhosis, you should avoid routine platelet transfusions based on count targets alone, as this is not supported by the AASLD 2024 guidelines. When it comes to coagulopathy, if your patient is on warfarin, reversal is achieved with 4-factor prothrombin complex concentrate, or PCC, plus concurrent IV vitamin K. For patients on DOACS with life-threatening bleeding, you should use specific reversal agents like idarusazumab for dabigatran, or 4-factor PCC for factor XA inhibitors, as andexanet alpha was withdrawn from the US market. And a critical point for patients with cirrhosis: do not chase the INR with fresh frozen plasma. The elevated INR in liver disease does not accurately reflect the patient's true bleeding risk, and FFP administration adds volume that can worsen portal hypertension. The goals of endoscopy are both diagnostic and therapeutic. But timing is key, and the patient must be hemodynamically stable before the procedure. For suspected variceal bleeding, endoscopy should be performed within 12 hours, according to AASLD 2024. For high-risk non-variceal bleeding, the target is within 24 hours, per ACG 2021. Interestingly, the European Society, or ESGE, strongly recommends against urgent endoscopy within 12 hours for this group, as it may not improve outcomes. This is supported by the Lau 2020 New England Journal of Medicine trial, which found that for patients with high-risk ulcers and a GBS of 12 or more, endoscopy within 6 hours did not improve 30-day mortality compared to the standard 24-hour window. For low-risk patients with a GBS of 0 to 1, outpatient endoscopy is the appropriate course. During endoscopy for non-variceal bleeding, we use the Forest classification to assess rebleeding risk. High-risk lesions include active bleeding, Forest IA, or spurting hemorrhage, which has a rebleeding risk of approximately 55 to 90%, and IB, or oozing hemorrhage. Also high risk are stigmata of recent hemorrhage, such as a non-bleeding visible vessel, or Forest IIA, and an adherent clot, or Forest IIB. Low-risk lesions, Forest IIC and 3, have a clean base or only a flat pigmented spot and do not require endoscopic hemostasis. For high-risk lesions, the standard of care is combination therapy, using an epinephrine injection followed by a second modality, such as thermal coagulation or clips. Management of an adherent clot or Forest IIB is debated. While some guidelines suggest gentle clot removal to treat the underlying lesion, meta-analyses have shown variable results. For variceal bleeding, the endoscopic approach depends on the location of the varices. For esophageal varices, endoscopic variceal ligation or banding is the gold standard. For gastric varices, it's more complex. Those that are a continuation of esophageal varices along the lesser curve, called G.V.1, can be treated with banding. However, for cardiofundal or isolated gastric varices, G.V.2 or I.G.V.1, the AASLD and Baveno 7 guidelines recommend either cyanoacrylate glue injection or a TIPS procedure as first-line options. TIPS is especially preferred if the bleeding is refractory or recurrent. An alternative for gastric varices is BRTO, or balloon-occluded retrograde transvenous obliteration, especially in patients without significant portal hypertension. A key intervention to prevent rebleeding in high-risk variceal patients is the preemptive TIPS procedure. This should be performed within 72 hours of the initial endoscopy. The 2024 AASLD criteria for preemptive TIPS are a Child-Pugh C score of 10 to 13, or a Child-Pugh B score of 8 to 9 with active bleeding seen on endoscopy. The evidence for this is strong. A landmark 2010 New England Journal of Medicine paper by Garcia-Pagan showed that early TIPS reduces both rebleeding and mortality by over 50%. However, we must also consider futility. While not standardized cutoffs, markers of very high mortality, such as a MELD score over 30 or a lactate over 12, predict high 6-week mortality, while a Child-Pugh score over 13 predicts high 1-year mortality. If TIPS is not immediately available, rescue therapies like a Sengstaken-Blakemore balloon tamponade, used for a maximum of 24 hours and requiring intubation, or esophageal stents can serve as a bridge. After successful endoscopic hemostasis for a high-risk non-variceal bleed, the patient should receive a high-dose intravenous PPI infusion for 72 hours. Afterwards, they should be stepped down to an oral PPI twice daily for 2 weeks. It is critical to test for H. pylori. If positive, treat it. If the initial biopsy is negative, you should retest later, as false negatives can occur in the setting of acute bleeding. Always confirm eradication after treatment. For patients on aspirin for secondary cardiovascular prevention, guidelines vary, but it should be resumed within 1 to 5 days once hemostasis is secure. Other anticoagulants should be resumed within 7 days, per ESGE 2021 guidelines. Post-endoscopy management for variceal bleeding is different. Vasoactive agents are continued for 2 to 5 days, and antibiotics for a maximum of 7 days. The PPI should be discontinued once a variceal source is confirmed, unless there is another indication like a coexisting peptic ulcer. The rationale is that PPIs offer no benefit for variceal rebleeding, which is driven by portal pressure, not acid, and they may increase the risk of infection in cirrhotic patients. For secondary prophylaxis, we start non-selective beta blockers, with carvedilol being preferred per AASLD 2024, once vasoactive agents are stopped. We also perform serial EVL, repeating banding every 2 to 4 weeks until the varices are obliterated. Finally, early enteral nutrition should be started within 24 hours. What do we do if the bleeding recurs? For non-variceal rebleeding, first optimize medical therapy, ensuring the patient is on a high-dose IV PPI. Then, perform a repeat endoscopy for a second attempt at hemostasis. If endoscopy fails again, the next step is transcatheter arterial embolization, or TAE, performed by interventional radiology. Surgery is a last resort. CT angiography can be considered to locate the bleeding source if endoscopy fails or is not feasible. For variceal rebleeding, the answer is more straightforward. Salvage TIPS is the treatment of choice. Management doesn't end at discharge. For patients with gastric ulcers, a repeat endoscopy in 8 to 12 weeks is necessary to ensure healing and rule out an underlying malignancy. For those treated for H. pylori, you must confirm eradication. This is done with a urea breath test or stool antigen test at least 4 weeks after completing antibiotic therapy, and after holding PPIS for 1 to 2 weeks. Finally, all patients should receive counseling on the importance of avoiding NSAIDs. Finally, let's discuss patient disposition. ICU admission is warranted for patients with hemodynamic instability despite initial resuscitation, ongoing hematemesis, a need for intubation, significant comorbidities, or those with high-risk variceal bleeding. Patients with a GBS score of 2 or more who are stable after resuscitation can be admitted to the medical floor. And finally, patients with a GBS of 0 to 1 who are hemodynamically stable with no significant comorbidities and are reliable for follow-up can be safely managed as an outpatient. To summarize, here are the key takeaways. 1. Resuscitate first. ABCS, 2 large-bore IVS, and a restrictive transfusion strategy are paramount. 2. Differentiate. The management path diverges significantly for variceal versus non-variceal bleeding. 3. Risk stratify. Use the GBS score to guide disposition. 4. Start meds early. Initiate vasoactive agents and antibiotics immediately for suspected variceal bleeding. 5. Timely endoscopy. Perform endoscopy within 12 hours for variceal and 24 hours for high-risk non-variceal bleeding. 6. Use combination therapy for high-risk non-variceal ulcers. 7. Prevent rebleeding with preemptive TIPS for high-risk variceal patients and secondary prophylaxis with beta blockers and banding. And 8. Follow up to ensure H. pylori eradication and gastric ulcer healing. Thank you.